Have you ever noticed that Joe Dispenza and Neville Goddard seem to be teaching the same thing, even though they lived decades apart? If you ask successful personal development coaches who influenced them the most, I guarantee you'll hear Neville Goddard's name over and over again. His teachings shaped the modern manifestation and personal development movement. Joe Dispenza came decades later and began explaining many of those same principles through neuroscience. Neville explained them through spiritual law. Joe explained them through the brain and body. Different language, very similar message. Neville became famous for one powerful idea: live from the end. In other words, become the version of yourself who already has the life you want before your circumstances change. Joe Dispenza teaches something remarkably similar. He tells people to become their future self now. Not after they get the promotion, not after they make more money, not after they find the relationship. Become that person first. Both teachers understood something that most people miss. Your outer world follows your inner identity. Let's use wealth as an example. Neville Goddard would tell you, stop saying, "I hope I become wealthy someday." Instead, claim it. I am financially free. Then ask yourself, how would I think if I already knew I was financially free? How would I make decisions? How would I carry myself? How would I respond when challenges show up? Then begin living from that identity every single day. Neville would simply say, remain faithful to that assumption. Now, listen to how Joe Dispenza explains the same principle, as he would tell you that your brain has been programmed through years of repetition. If you spent years worrying about money, checking your bank account every day, feeling stressed every time a bill arrives, your brain has created strong neural pathways around scarcity. Your body has also become emotionally conditioned to those feelings. Fear, stress, lack. Those emotions become familiar. So the moment you declare, I am financially free, your old programming immediately pushes back. No, you're not. That's why changing feels uncomfortable. Not because you're doing something wrong, but because you're leaving behind an identity you've practiced for years. Joe teaches that every time you interrupt that old pattern, every time you choose gratitude instead of fear, every time you think like your future self instead of your past self, you're strengthening new neural pathways. You're literally teaching your brain and body a new way to operate. Eventually, thinking abundantly no longer feels like pretending. It becomes your new normal. The same principle applies to your health. Neville would tell you to stop identifying as someone who is sick and hoping to become healthy. Instead, he says, live from the identity of someone who is already healthy. Joe explains that repeated stress keeps your body locked in survival mode. But when you repeatedly practice elevated emotions like gratitude, joy, confidence, and hope, your brain and body begin adapting to a healthier internal state. Different explanation, same direction. The same is true for relationships. Neville would encourage you to stop identifying as someone who is lonely or unloved. Instead, he says, become the version of yourself who already feels love. Joe would explain that many people continue attracting the same relationships because they're emotionally attached to familiar patterns. Change your inner identity, and eventually your outer relationships begin changing too. So what's the difference between these two teachers? Neville focused on the principle. Become the new identity. Joe explains what's happening inside your brain and body while you're becoming that identity. One gives us the spiritual principle. The other explains the science behind the transformation. I don't believe you have to choose one over the other. I believe they complement each other beautifully. Together, they remind us that lasting change always begins from within. Here's what I want you to remember, whether you call it living from the end or becoming your future self, the message is the same. Your life doesn't begin changing when your circumstances improve. Your circumstances begin changing when your identity improves. That's where real transformation begins. Now, if this message helped you see these teachings in a new way, I'd love to have you join me here on Mastery of State. Every week, we explore practical ways to master your thoughts, your identity, and your state so you can create the life you truly desire. And remember, you don't become successful because life changes. Life begins changing because you become someone different first.